My name is Madison, and I'm 28 years old. 6 months ago, I thought I knew who my family was. I thought I understood the complicated web of love, resentment, and obligation that tied us together. I was wrong about everything. At 3 in the morning on a Tuesday in March, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my father's name, and my stomach immediately clenched. Dad never called at normal hours, let alone at 3 a.m. When I answered, his voice was slurred with alcohol and thick with the kind of rage that used to terrify me as a child. "Madison!" He spat my name like it tasted bitter. "You think you're so much better than us now, don't you? Living in your fancy apartment, working your big city job. But you know what you really are? You're unwanted, always have been. We should have given you away when we had the chance." The line went dead. I sat in my dark bedroom, holding the phone against my ear long after the dial tone started. Those words hit me like a physical blow, but something strange happened. Instead of the familiar crushing shame I'd felt my entire life, I felt something else. Clarity. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Before I tell you about this life-changing decision, hit like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family loyalty and betrayal that might just change how you see your own relationships. You see, that phone call became the catalyst for the most dramatic transformation of my life. Within 9 hours of hearing those words, my father would be sitting across from my desk, desperate and humble, begging me for something I never imagined he'd need from the daughter he called unwanted. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how we got there, you need to know about the family I grew up in. The Hartwell family looked perfect from the outside. My dad, Robert, was a successful contractor who built half the houses in our small town. My mom, Linda, was the type of woman who made Pinterest-worthy dinners and volunteered at every school function. My older brother Jake seemed destined for greatness, star athlete turned successful real estate agent. And then there was me, the accidental third child who came along when my parents thought they were done, the daughter who never quite fit the mold they'd created for their family. Growing up, I learned to make myself small. I studied harder than Jake ever had to, hoping good grades would earn me the same pride my parents showered on him. I cleaned house without being asked, cooked dinner when mom was tired, and never complained when family photos were taken without me because I happened to be at the library or working my part-time job. The pattern was so subtle, so ingrained, that I didn't recognize it as rejection for years. It was just how things were in the Hartwell house. Jake got the spotlight, I got the leftovers of their attention. When I graduated valedictorian, my parents attended the ceremony but spent the entire reception talking to other families about Jake's latest real estate deal. When I got my first job at a marketing firm in the city, Dad's response was to ask if I thought I was too good for the family business now. The distance between us grew wider as I built my career. I climbed the ladder at Morrison & Associates, one of the city's most prestigious firms. I specialized in crisis management and corporate restructuring. Basically, I helped failing businesses figure out how to survive. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was better at saving other people's companies than I was at fixing my relationship with my family. By the time I turned 27, I was a partner at the firm. I had an apartment with a view of the river, a car I'd bought with my own money, and a life I'd built entirely on my own terms. But I still answered every phone call from home. I still sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts. I still hoped that someday they'd see me as valuable as Jake. That Tuesday morning phone call shattered that hope forever. But sometimes you have to break something completely before you can rebuild it into something stronger. As I sat in my bed, staring at the ceiling and replaying my father's words, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to hide from his cruelty anymore. I wasn't going to pretend his words didn't matter. Instead, I was going to use them as fuel for the most important conversation of my life. Have you ever had a moment where someone's cruelty suddenly freed you from caring what they thought? That's exactly what happened to me at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in March. To understand what happened next, you need to know more about the family dynamics that shaped my entire childhood. The Hartwell family operated on an unspoken hierarchy that put Jake at the top and me at the bottom. My brother Jake was everything my parents wanted in a child. Tall, charismatic, athletic, and blessed with the kind of confidence that made everything look effortless. He played football in high school, dated the homecoming queen, and had scholarship offers from 3 universities. When he decided to skip college and go straight into real estate with his girlfriend's father, my parents called it entrepreneurial spirit. Jake had a way of filling every room he entered. His laugh was loud and infectious. He told stories that had everyone hanging on every word. At family gatherings, he was the center of attention, regaling relatives with tales of his latest business victories or weekend adventures. Meanwhile, I was the child who read books during family parties. I preferred quiet conversations to loud celebrations. I was thoughtful where Jake was spontaneous, careful where he was bold. These weren't character flaws, but in my family they were treated like disappointments. My mother, Linda, had always dreamed of having a daughter she could dress up and parade around town. She wanted tea parties and mother-daughter shopping trips. Instead, she got a bookworm who preferred jeans to dresses and would rather spend Saturday afternoon at the library than the mall. Dad saw Jake as his legacy. They worked construction jobs together during summers, talked about expanding the family business, and shared a love of football and beer that I never understood. Robert Hartwell was a man's man who expected his children to reflect his values of hard work and traditional success. I represented something different. I asked too many questions. I challenged ideas instead of accepting them. I wanted to understand the why behind every rule and expectation. This made me exhausting to parents who preferred compliance over curiosity. The favoritism wasn't always obvious. It lived in the details. Jake's achievements were celebrated with family dinners and phone calls to grandparents. Mine were acknowledged, with a brief "good job" and a quick change of subject. When Jake bought his first house at 23, Dad spent weeks telling everyone in town about his successful son. When I made partner at my firm, the announcement was met with polite nodding and questions about when I planned to move back home. Christmas mornings were particularly painful. Jake's gifts were thoughtful and expensive, chosen with care and attention to his interests. Mine were generic, clearly purchased last minute from whatever store was convenient. One year, I received a vacuum cleaner while Jake got a new set of golf clubs. The message was clear even without words. But the real damage wasn't in the gifts or the celebrations. It was in the constant message that I wasn't quite enough. Not feminine enough for Mom, not traditional enough for Dad, not charismatic enough to matter the way Jake mattered. I learned to cope by achieving. If I couldn't be their favorite, I could at least be undeniably successful. I graduated summa cum laude from college, earned my MBA, and built a career that surpassed anything Jake had accomplished. But success didn't change their perception of me. It only reinforced their belief that I thought I was better than them. The worst part was how they talked about me when they thought I couldn't hear. I was the daughter who'd gotten too big for her britches, the child who'd forgotten where she came from, the ungrateful girl who preferred strangers to family. By my mid-20s, I'd mostly accepted that this was just how our family worked. I'd stopped expecting equal treatment and learned to find validation outside of home. I had friends who appreciated my mind, colleagues who respected my expertise, and a life that proved my worth every single day. But that acceptance came with a price. I'd internalized their message so completely that I believed I was harder to love than Jake. I thought my personality was fundamentally flawed. I convinced myself that their coldness was something I deserved. The night of Dad's call, all of that changed. His words were so cruel, so deliberately hurtful, that they broke through years of conditioned acceptance. For the first time, I saw our family dynamics clearly. I wasn't the problem. They were. If you've ever felt like the scapegoat in your family, tell me about it in the comments. Sometimes we need to hear that we're not alone in these experiences. After Dad's call, I couldn't sleep. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, watching the sunrise through my apartment window. Something inside me had shifted permanently. The daughter who'd spent 28 years seeking their approval was gone, replaced by a woman who finally understood her own worth. I called in sick to work that Wednesday morning, not because I was ill, but because I had research to do. I spent hours at my laptop, digging into public records and business filings. What I discovered changed everything. Hartwell Construction was failing, badly. The company that had been the source of my father's pride and our family's financial security was drowning in debt. They'd overextended on 3 major projects, taken out loans they couldn't repay, and were facing lawsuits from 2 different subcontractors. The irony was breathtaking. While Dad was calling me unwanted at 3 a.m, his business empire was crumbling around him. The daughter he'd dismissed as too big for her britches happened to specialize in exactly the kind of crisis management he desperately needed. I dug deeper. Jake's real estate business wasn't doing much better. The market had shifted, and his aggressive tactics were catching up with him. He'd leveraged himself into several properties he couldn't sell, and his commission income had dropped by 60% over the past year. The family that had always made me feel like the failure was failing spectacularly without me. But this story isn't just about my parents and Jake. It's also about the people who showed me what real family looks like. My colleague Sarah Chen had become my closest friend over the past 2 years. Sarah understood toxic family dynamics because she'd escaped her own. She was the first person to help me see that love doesn't come with conditions, and that healthy families celebrate each member's success. Sarah had been pushing me for months to establish boundaries with my family. "Madison," she'd say over our weekly coffee dates, "you wouldn't tolerate this behavior from strangers. Why do you accept it from people who claim to love you?" There was also Marcus Williams, my mentor at the firm. Marcus had grown up poor in Detroit and built his success through sheer determination. He saw potential in me that I'd never seen. In myself. "You have a gift for seeing solutions where others see only problems," he'd tell me. "Don't let anyone make you apologize for that gift." These relationships showed me what it felt like to be valued for who I was, rather than criticized for who I wasn't. They created a stark contrast with the conditional love I'd always known, at home. The morning after Dad's call, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just 24 hours earlier. I was going to offer to help save Hartwell Construction, but on my terms. Not as the desperate daughter seeking approval, but as a professional who understood her value. I spent the rest of Wednesday crafting a proposal. I outlined exactly what it would take to save Dad's business, how much it would cost, and what changes needed to be implemented immediately. The plan was comprehensive, realistic, and expensive. It would require bringing in outside investors, restructuring all existing debt, and completely changing how the company operated. Most importantly, it would require my father to acknowledge that his unwanted daughter was the only person capable of saving everything he'd built. I printed the proposal and put it in a manila envelope. Then I called my assistant at Morrison and Associates and asked her to schedule a meeting with Robert Hartwell for the following morning. When she asked what the meeting was regarding, I told her to say only that it was about a potential business opportunity. That night, I called Sarah and told her everything. She listened without judgment as I explained my plan. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Are you doing this to help him or to prove something to yourself?" she asked finally. It was a fair question. The honest answer was both. I wanted to help, despite everything, because I still loved my family. But I also needed to prove to myself that I was strong enough to engage with them as equals, rather than as the child begging for scraps of affection. "Whatever your reasons," Sarah said, "make sure you protect yourself. Don't let them convince you that you owe them anything more than you're willing to give. Have you ever reached a point where you realized you had the power to help people? Who'd hurt you? Let me know in the comments how you handled that situation." Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzly. I chose my outfit carefully, opting for my most professional suit, the navy one that made me look older and more authoritative. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a successful businesswoman who had something valuable to offer. I arrived at the office early and arranged the conference room to my advantage. I positioned myself at the head of the table with the proposal folder in front of me. When my assistant buzzed to say that Mr. Hartwell had arrived, my heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. Dad walked into the conference room looking older than I remembered. His face was drawn, his shoulders slightly slumped. He wore his best shirt and tie, but I could see the stress in the tight lines around his eyes. For just a moment, I felt a flash of the old sympathy, the daughter's instinct to protect her parent from pain. Then I remembered his voice at 3 a.m. calling me unwanted. "Madison," he said, sitting down across from me. His tone was cautious, almost confused. "Your assistant said something about a business opportunity?" I slid the folder across the table to him. "Open it, Dad." He pulled out the financial analysis I'd prepared, and I watched his face change as he recognized the numbers. His business records, his debt obligations, his cash flow projections, all laid out in neat columns that told the story of his company's impending collapse. "How did you get this information?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's all public record if you know where to look," I replied evenly. "The question isn't how I got it. The question is what you plan to do about it." Dad stared at the papers for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes were different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen before. Respect. "You did this overnight?" he asked. "I'm good at my job, Dad. Better than you've ever bothered to notice." He flinched at that, but didn't argue. Instead, he kept reading. The proposal I'd crafted was thorough and professional. It outlined exactly how Morrison and Associates could save Hartwell Construction, what it would cost, and what changes would be required. "This would work?" he asked finally. "It's your only chance," I said. "Without immediate intervention, you'll be filing for bankruptcy within 60 days. You'll lose everything, including the house." The mention of the house hit him hard. That house represented 30 years of his work, his legacy, his proof that Robert Hartwell was a success. The thought of losing it clearly terrified him. "What would you want in return?" he asked. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. I looked at my father, really looked at him, and saw not the intimidating authority figure from my childhood, but a broken man who'd run out of options. "An apology," I said quietly. "A real one. For every time you made me feel like I wasn't good enough. For every celebration you ruined with your indifference. For calling me unwanted 36 hours ago." Dad's face went white. He opened his mouth as if to deny it, then closed it again. We both knew he couldn't lie his way out of this one. "Madison, he started, then stopped. "I was drunk. I was angry about the business, and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair." "No, Dad, it wasn't fair. But it also wasn't unusual. You've been treating me like an inconvenience my entire life. The only difference is that usually you're more subtle about it." Tears started in his eyes then. Actual tears from the man who'd raised me to believe that emotions were weakness. "You were never unwanted," he whispered. "You were just different. I didn't know how to connect with you the way I could with Jake." "So you decided not to try?" He nodded slowly, shame written across his features. "I was wrong. About so many things. You're not unwanted, Madison. You're remarkable. This proposal proves it." The apology I'd waited 28 years to hear hung in the air between us. It wasn't perfect, but it was genuine. I could hear the regret in his voice, see the recognition in his eyes. "If you want my help," I said, "things change. You don't get to dismiss me anymore. You don't get to make me feel small to make yourself feel big. We work together as equals, or we don't work together at all." He nodded eagerly. "Whatever you want. Just please. Help me save this." For the first time in my life, my father was asking me for something he couldn't get anywhere else. The next 6 months transformed everything. Saving Hartwell Construction became the most challenging project of my career, but also the most rewarding. Not because of the business itself, but because of how it changed my relationship with my family. Dad threw himself into the restructuring process with an intensity that surprised me. He attended every meeting, implemented every recommendation, and slowly began to trust my judgment. For the first time, we worked as partners rather than father and daughter. He started asking for my opinion instead of dismissing it. And the changes weren't just professional. Dad began calling me regularly, not at 3 a.m. with drunken insults, but during normal hours to discuss business strategies or just to check in. He asked about my life, my apartment, my career goals. These weren't earth-shattering conversations, but they represented a seismic shift in our dynamic. Mom's transformation was slower, but equally significant. She'd been horrified when Dad told her about his late-night phone call. "I raised you better than that," she'd said to him, and for the first time, I saw her defend me instead of making excuses for his behavior. Linda started making an effort to understand my world. She visited my apartment and seemed genuinely impressed by what I'd built for myself. She asked questions about my work that went beyond polite small talk. When I explained crisis management to her, she said, "You're basically a doctor for businesses." "That's incredible, Madison." Jake's reaction was more complicated. My success in saving Dad's company threatened his position as the family golden child. At first, he was skeptical of my involvement, suggesting that Dad hire a local consultant instead of trusting his city girl daughter. But as the results became undeniable, Jake's attitude shifted. The brother who'd always overshadowed me began seeking my advice about his own business struggles. It was awkward at first, both of us navigating this new dynamic where I was the expert and he was the one asking for help. The real breakthrough came during a family dinner 4 months after the conference room confrontation. Dad was updating everyone on the company's progress when he said, "None of this would have been possible without Madison. She saved everything we worked for." Jake looked at me across the table and said, "I owe you an apology too. I never realized how much Mom and Dad overlooked your accomplishments. That wasn't fair to you." If you've ever experienced a moment where your entire family dynamic shifted, tell me about it in the comments. These transformations are rare, but incredibly powerful when they happen. But this story isn't just about my family learning to value me. It's also about me learning to value myself enough to demand better treatment. The daughter who used to accept crumbs of affection learned to expect the full meal of respect and love. I established boundaries that would have been unthinkable before that March night. When Mom suggested I move back home to be closer to family, I politely but firmly declined. When Dad asked if I wanted to join the family business permanently, I explained that I loved my career at Morrison & Associates and had no intention of changing course. These weren't rejections of my family, but affirmations of my independence. I could love them while also maintaining the life I'd built for myself. 1 year later, I was sitting in the same conference room where I'd confronted Dad about his business. This time, we were celebrating. Hartwell Construction had not only survived, but was thriving. They'd completed 2 major projects ahead of schedule and under budget. Dad had been featured in a local business magazine as a comeback story of the year. "I have something for you," Dad said, sliding an envelope across the table. Inside was a check made out to Morrison & Associates for the full amount of our consulting fees, plus a bonus that was more than generous. But underneath the check was something more valuable. A handwritten letter from my father. "Madison," it read, "I spent 28 years not seeing the extraordinary woman right in front of me. I called you unwanted, but the truth is, you're exactly what this family needed. Thank you for saving more than just my business. You saved us all. Love, Dad." I looked up to find him watching me with tears in his eyes. "I mean every word," he said. "I know you do," I replied, and for the first time in my life, that was completely true. Today, 18 months after that terrible phone call, my relationship with my family looks nothing like it did before. We're not perfect, and we probably never will be. But we're real in a way we never were when I was trying so desperately to earn love that should have been freely given. Dad and I talk every week now, sometimes about business, sometimes about life. He asks about my friends, my career goals, my happiness. He listens to my answers without judgment or unsolicited advice. The man who once called me unwanted now tells people proudly about his daughter who saved his business. Mom has become someone I actually enjoy spending time with. We discovered we both love true crime podcasts and historical documentaries. We have standing lunch dates when I visit home, and she stopped trying to change me into the daughter she thought she wanted. Instead, she's gotten to know the daughter she actually has. Jake and I have developed a friendship I never thought possible. He refers clients to me when they need crisis management, and I've helped him restructure his business model for better long-term stability. Last month, he told me I was the smartest person in our family. Coming from the brother who'd always been the favorite, that meant everything. But the most important relationship I've transformed is the one with myself. I learned that love isn't something you have to earn through perfect behavior or constant achievement. Real love accepts you as you are while encouraging you to grow. I also learned that setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary. When you teach people how to treat you with respect, everyone benefits. My family became better versions of themselves when I stopped accepting their worst behavior. The scared, little girl who used to make herself small to avoid disappointment has been replaced by a woman who knows her worth. I still work hard and achieve great things, but now it's for my own satisfaction rather than for external validation. Sarah was right when she told me to protect myself during this process. There were moments when I was tempted to fall back into old patterns, to accept less than I deserved because it was familiar. But every time I felt that pull, I remembered Dad's voice calling me unwanted, and I found the strength to demand better. Marcus continues to be an incredible mentor, and he's told me that watching me navigate this family crisis taught him new approaches for his own consulting work. "You showed me that sometimes the best business solution is also the most personal one," he said. "If you're watching this and recognizing yourself in my story, I want you to know something important. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive, too ambitious, too different, or too anything. You are exactly who you're supposed to be. Maybe you're the family scapegoat, the child who never quite fit the mold your parents created. Maybe you're successful in your own life, but still feel like a failure when you go home for the holidays. If that's you, please know that their inability to see your worth doesn't diminish your value. Setting boundaries with family is terrifying because we're taught that blood relations are sacred, but toxic relationships are toxic regardless of DNA. You have the right to demand respect from everyone in your life, especially the people who claim to love you. The process isn't easy. There were nights when I questioned whether I was being too harsh, too unforgiving. There were moments when I missed the familiar dysfunction because at least it was predictable. Growth is uncomfortable, but it's worth every difficult conversation and awkward family dinner. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to completely rebuild a family relationship? What did that process look like for you? Did you find that setting boundaries ultimately brought you closer to the people you love? Or did some relationships end completely? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about family, boundaries, and finding your worth. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not unwanted, they're just undervalued by people who don't know how to see their light. And remember, the people who truly love you will rise to meet your expectations when you clearly communicate what you need. The ones who don't were never really in your corner anyway. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a broken relationship is refuse to accept the broken parts anymore. Sometimes calling someone unwanted at 3 a.m. is exactly the wake-up call everyone needed to become the family you all deserve to be from the beginning. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.